Alrighty. How much minutes was?
It's hard to cut it short when you're actually talking. Over and over. This video.
Yeah, that's so weird.
It's okay.
So you want the
What happened
microphone
to the
be seen?
clipboard?
Make sure you hit the big subscribe button and don't forget to click the bell icon so you don't miss a thing.
Alright, hey, welcome back to the channel, guys. Welcome back to Flying by Faith Studio. And we have a very special brother with us this week that we're going to be talking with. And before we get into the interview with him, we ask that you always give a thumbs up to these videos, leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel, and share these links with your family, friends, and whoever else you think could benefit from this video. Now we have with us Daniel Lui, and I'm sure you guys want to know who he is, what he does, and everything. So I want to welcome you to our studio, Daniel. And yeah, let's start with, who are you?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, my name is Daniel, and I'm a volunteer here in the Philippines, specifically in southern Palawan, with Philippine Adventist Medical Aviation Services for the last 4.5 years.
Oh, wow, nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
and I've had the opportunity to get involved in a lot of different things, but perhaps one of my main roles is a missionary pilot.
Oh, nice. So, okay, so tell us a little of your background. Were you born in the Philippines? Because, you know, a lot of people think you look Filipino.
They do, and it kind of helps me blend in. I just need to work more on learning the language. But yeah, no, actually, I grew up in America, and most recently in Northern California.
Oh, nice.
And so before coming to the Philippines, that's where I came from, and kind of traveled throughout the U.S. before that. But
Oh, nice.
Married
So
in America.
basically born and raised in the U.S.
Yes.
Any training, your training, educational background, how you got into pilot stuff, mechanic or whatever?
Yeah, so I kind of did a lot of different things, kind of an eclectic background, but I started with aviation training, so I am a airplane and helicopter pilot, even though I primarily focus on helicopter. And I also received training as a paramedic and as a aircraft mechanic.
Oh, nice, nice. So how did you get into missionary work?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but as a young person, I really struggled with what I wanted to do with my life. And I was kind of following after the cultural expectation of finishing my education and then pursuing a successful career to make money and move on with life. But I remember attending a Bible college for a year, and it was there that God kind of reshifted my focus in life. I remember reading a quote from the book Desire of Ages that said, no matter what one's calling in life, his first interest should be to win souls for Christ. And that is the quote, I would say, that really shaped the direction that eventually led me here to be a missionary, because I realized that my goals for life were selfish. They were focused on just making money and becoming successful in this world. And then I began to pray what vocation, what career, what calling I could use that had ministry as a priority.
Oh, very good. So after your training and so on, and you found yourself here in the Philippines for 4.5 years volunteering with Philippine Adventist Medical Aviation Services, what has been your experience like with your training that you had back in the US? Now you're here in the Philippines. How were you able to take that training and apply it to your experience here in the Philippines?
One of the things I love about mission work is it's very, very diverse. And so you'll never get sick of one thing, because even though I am a missionary pilot, that's actually a very small part of my day is flying. Pretty much any skill that you can obtain before coming to the mission field will be put into practice and used. And so I grew up in the country, and of course, having the different educational background, I've pretty much been able to use everything that God had given me before that. Anything from welding and working in the shop, assisting with construction, operating heavy equipment, to, of course, flying, doing maintenance, and also utilizing medical skills. So it's really neat, because one minute you can be, flying to some remote island, picking up a patient. The next minute you're helping to build a church, and then a few days later you're preaching in a church, or sharing, helping with the medical mission. So it really is a diverse work.
Nice. And I like that too. So you never get bored. It's not a 9-to-5 job where
Exactly.
you go work, punch in the numbers and the clock and whatnot. So next question I have here, I'm sure after 4.5 years you've had many experiences. What are some of your memorable moments where you saw God's lead in you and your missionary efforts?
Of course, there's so many times when I have seen God working. I mean, when you're in His service, you get to see miracles every day. I just think of one or two specific experiences. I remember flying out to a remote island to pick up a young boy who had a subdural or epidural hematoma, which is essentially a bleed in his brain from a billiard table falling on his head. And typically I transport to the closest local hospital, because helicopters are expensive to operate, and whenever possible bring him to the closest appropriate medical facility. However, after dropping this boy off at the ER, and I was walking back out to the helicopter, I just remember feeling this nagging impression, like God was telling me, you need to go back in and offer to take that boy further up to the capital city, because perhaps this local hospital cannot provide the care that he needs. Because he was unconscious and he had vomited blood along the way, and he really needed to get into surgery to get the care he needed. And so normally after I drop off the patient, I leave and go on my way, but I just couldn't shake that feeling. So I walked back in kind of sheepishly into the ER, and before I could even share with the doctor my willingness to take that patient to another facility if necessary, the doctor came up to me and she said, hey, can you bring this boy to Puerto, the capital city, because he needs further care? And make a long story short, she wrote a quick referral. We loaded him back up, took him out to the capital city, and a year or two after that, I remember flying out to that same island and seeing all the kids and children and even the parents gather, but I remember seeing this boy waving to me with his father. And I recognized him as the same boy who I had transported to the hospital, and to see that how he had grown and he was alive and well, and how thankful they were. They had come multiple times to the landing strip just to come to thank me. And not that we live just for thanks, but it brought tears to my eyes, because I thought, this boy now has a chance at life again, not only physical but also spiritual, eternal life. And so, that's just one small example, but there are so many times where God may speak to you, or He may have divine appointments, or you see His special protective hand. I don't have time to share them all. But if you continue to ask God for help and to walk with Him and to seek His face every day, then He will continue to manifest Himself in so many ways.
Oh, that's a good one. I haven't heard that one. It's my first time hearing it. That's a real blessing. So this is a question that pretty much I ask every single person that comes in this studio, and it is, yeah, it's amazing what you're doing. But what I want to know, which a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of these subscribers want to know, how do you survive financially doing missionary work for 4.5 years?
That's a really good question, because I don't receive a stipend or anything from the ministry at all. I don't receive any financial help. And when I came, I really didn't have any regular supporters or anything, and I had no idea how I was going to be supported. And even though the ministry offered to give me a stipend, if I needed it, we decided, well, let's test God. Let's see and try to raise a certain amount for my initial commitment, which was only 7 months, and see what God does. And if necessary, I may ask the ministry for help, but let's try to be an asset rather than a burden to the ministry, and see what God, if God really wants me here, let's see if He'll provide. And I can honestly say it's been amazing, because over the last 4.5 years that I've been here, I still don't have a lot of, big supporters or donors, or even a lot of regular supporters. It's more random. However, God has amazingly blessed, and not once have I gone hungry.
Wow.
Not once have I run out of food, and more than that, as I have attempted to be a blessing to the ministry, I've been able to help support the ministry in different aspects, not only with my skills, but also financially, as I am able to, especially the helicopter side of it, has been my goal to support. And God has just blown me away over the last 4 years. Sometimes, we don't know where it'll come from, but if you step out in faith and work for God, and if it's His will, He will provide.
Oh, praise the Lord for that. So, you guys have heard it for yourself. It's an amazing experience. And the good thing I like is Daniel does have his newsletters that you send out time to time. You do put out your newsletters. So we'll put like a description down below if you want to ever see and follow his newsletter of what he's doing and what's happening with him. We'll put a link in the description bar, and you can definitely subscribe to that and keep abreast with his stories. Before we end our interview, I have one last question. We get this people been asking me a lot in social media, persons I've met in person, face to face. What could you say to individuals who might be watching, they're listening to your story, and they're out there thinking, how can I get into missionary work? Whether it be flying, mechanic, or whatever it may be, how would you recommend that someone can get a start into missionary work?
Well, absolutely. I would say the first thing that you need to start is by praying, because ultimately God has a special work for each of you to do, and you need to determine what is God's will for you. And when He impresses you in a special line, perhaps being a missionary pilot or mechanic, which we have a huge need for, especially mechanics, is make yourself as useful as you possibly can, as diverse as you possibly can. So the more skills, the more educational experience you can gain before coming to the mission field, the more of an asset, the more of a blessing you can be. Because, as I mentioned before, mission work is not isolated to one particular skill set. But as a missionary, you need to be able to be active in many, many different areas. And so the more skills, the more training you can receive, the better. Especially for the pilot side, I recommend at least getting your private and instrument rating, or even higher. We, as a ministry, historically have not really trained pilots from the beginning to a certain rating, but we take the individuals who have already been trained and feel the calling and the burden to work for missions, and then we do the type of training to make sure that they're safe and are accustomed to the local flying that we do, because it is very different than flying around an airport or what you might learn in flight school. So we do that type of transition training, but just seek God, and He will lead you to exactly what skill sets and what educational background that you will need.
Very good. Very. So you guys have heard it for yourself. No, I'm privileged. I've never flown on a helicopter. I'm just a private pilot so far, working on my instrument, and I've had the privilege of flying with Daniel, and I was just amazed that. I mean, I did the same leg with the motorcycle. It took me about 30 minutes to ride it, but the helicopter was under 5 minutes, or about 5 minutes, and we got to that location really quick. And it was a blessing to have flown with him. My first helicopter ride was with you, and to see just a snapshot of what you do every day and so on. Now, I have another question, which is, ministry is tough. It has a lot of challenges. Sometimes you might feel discouraged. You feel like you just want to pack up your stuff and go back home. And you said you've lasted 4.5 years. And I'm curious, I'm sure the viewers are curious as well, what kept you motivated to keep going for 4.5 years here in the Philippines as a missionary pilot?
Well, I would say that the number one thing that will keep you motivated, that will keep you in the mission field, is your calling. Because no matter where you go, you're always going to have challenges, especially in the mission field. I think it brings out character elements that a lot of us don't even realize we had until you get to the mission field. And you're always going to have challenges, but if you know specifically that God has called you there, and that is the work He has called you to do, then no matter what you face, God will help you to get through it. And then, just in addition to that, seeing what the work can do and how God has given you that specific skill set to do it. Like, as you mentioned, the helicopter, so many of these people would die because you can basically, an hour of hiking is equivalent to 1 minute of flying.
Wow.
In a helicopter. And so just being able to see what God can do through the equipment and through the workers that He puts into service, that is a continual inspiration to keep going.
Amazing experience, and I think I want to stretch him with one more question, guys, just for the sake of it. So you have your training. God has called you. You're now doing it. As you do the work, and you make observation in terms of some areas that you feel like you could improve this with more equipment, bigger equipment, more resources, and so on. When you see that need, how do you approach it from a missionary pilot standpoint? When you observe different needs and so on, what's your approach towards the need for more resources or additional training on your part or so on? How do you do that?
Well, the best way to approach it, of course, as with everything, is to start with prayer again, and then after that is to pursue it. Because even though from a human perspective, more equipment or different things are oftentimes expensive and may seem impossible, if we can use this equipment to be more efficient and more useful in the world in commercial endeavors, how much more important it is that we can use it to make God's work more efficient. And so I just remember several times, in the last 4.5 years that God has made that happen. Like, I remember digging by hand, strenuous labor to move like a river, to extend a runway and do different things. And our director and I, we were just dreaming of a backhoe because both of us had operated backhoes before, heavy equipment, and we saw how much time they could save. And I began to pray, and a long story short, God blessed in providing a donor, and then I went forward and tried to, put the awareness out there, put it in my newsletters, shared it with my church, and God impressed someone in my church to raise the money to ship the backhoe over after a donor donated the backhoe.
Oh.
And then most recently, amazingly, after operating the helicopter we had for the last 4.5 years, I've been praying for another one because to be a more powerful and safer platform, as well as our other one is due for overhaul, so it'll be down for a while until we can overhaul it. And we have multiple air bases that needs another one. And that's a whole nother story all in itself. But it's just been amazing to see how God has recently provided another helicopter.
Wow.
And so that has been a completely new faith journey for me that I had not been involved in as much in the past. But that's another story. But it's just been, God has the cattle on 1,000 hills.
Amen.
And if we're working for Him, and it is a legitimate need and it's His will, that He has more than the ability to provide it.
Amen, amen. I'm blessed, guys. I'm really blessed. At some point, I would want to hear more of that story, which I'm going to pull that out of him. But for now, that's pretty much it. We thank you very much for watching, and as you can see for yourself, Daniel Lui, helicopter pilot from the U.S., put himself by faith over here in the Philippines, and he said that over 4.5 years of ministering to different needs here in the Philippines, he has never gone to bed hungry. Amen. And he prays a lot, his faith is growing, and when you've had experiences like that, it's just an amazing experience, and I'm sure basically you can have that same experience as well. It's not that there's nothing special about him.
Not at all.
It's just he was willing to say, Lord, use me to make a difference in this world, and God has been amazing in doing that. Thank you very much for coming on the studio, and it's amazing, and we look forward to keeping in touch with you as you progress with your mission. Thank you again, and God bless, and